What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast, where we discuss everything in college football, NFL, Chicago Bears, college basketball, Illini sports, and being a football coach. We've talked to football coaches all over the country talking about football, basketball, culture, building, everything like that. Literally anything in sports you can think of is probably on this podcast. If any of that interests you, please hit the like button and the subscribe button on the Coach Steve Show YouTube channel. The podcast can be found anywhere you listen to your podcast, literally anywhere. Spotify, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, anywhere. So wherever you listen to it, please follow it, rate it, leave it a review, be a friend, tell a friend, share it out, help out with the algorithm that nobody seems to understand anymore. If you could do all that for me, it'd be greatly appreciated. Podcast is also brought to you by the Belly Up Sports Podcast Network. Go to bellyupsports.com. Check out all the content there. There's sports content on there and blogs for everybody. This podcast is also brought to you by Coach Stone Football and his Back to the Basics books and drills. Go to CoachStoneFootball.com and check out all of his books on football drills, practice planning, game planning, and much, much more. You will never have to look up another drill again, I promise. Thank you, Coach Stone, for sponsoring the podcast. Out there, are your linemen's helmets getting scuffed up during an inside run period? If so, there's a way to protect the shells and reduce the repetitive blows your guys are taking each and every week. It's guarding caps. Guarding caps can reduce 20 to 33% of the impact. It really focuses on the big guys in the trenches, and you cannot win without the big guys in the trenches. It's worn by 5 NFL teams and 200-plus colleges like Georgia, Alabama, Washington, Oklahoma, and Penn State. Check them out at guardiansports.com/guardingcaps. Use the code 15OFF to get 15% off your order, whether you're buying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or some big bulk item. guardiansports.com/guardingcaps. Use the code 15OFF for 15% off your order. Betting season is in full swing. If you head over to mybookie.ag to make your same game parlays, in-game bets, money lines, anything like that, use the code BELLYUPFANTASY, all one word, to double your first deposit. Mybookie.ag, BELLYUPFANTASY, all one word, to double your first deposit. All right. Big weekend in college football. We made it to as normal as we can get from COVID, the college football conference championships, which led into the college football playoff, which we will talk about later on. About somebody better be careful what they wish for. But big weekend in the conference championship weekend. I did a podcast talking about some of them, and we're going to discuss only some. The ones that were big time, but we will say who won and who won their conference. The first one of the conference football championship that happened on Friday was Oregon played Utah. Now, I believe I said Oregon would win, but I'm totally wrong. But the last time Oregon played Utah won, I believe, 38-7. Well, Utah came away with the win 38-10. Now, Oregon has not been healthy for most of the year, I believe. And Utah has always been a football team that comes out and plays well, plays hard, and they had Oregon's number this year. Utah had better, more, I would say, better quarterback play. It was a big one, and their defense. If Oregon just has a hard time running the football, then they're able to be stopped. When your rushing leader is 63 yards, that's kind of where they live. But also when you turn the ball over, Oregon threw 2 interceptions. So one was a pick six, that does not help. So Oregon has just not been themselves since they beat Ohio State. They have not been themselves. Utah has had a rough go, the tragic deaths of Ty 14 clinched their Rose Bowl berth in school history's very first one. It's just crazy. They just played better. Their defense stepped up. They were very motivated from those tragic deaths of the players that, if you guys haven't seen, you need to watch about them. It's very tragic, but thoughts and prayers to those families. But ever since then, they've been playing for them, and they've been playing a lot better. They've got a lot of toughness and resiliency. They just, Utah's always been a good football program, and people have looked over them. And in the Pac-12, it's come down the past couple of years with Utah, Oregon, and Washington, a little bit of Washington State. But I came in and said, when you play a team twice, it's going to go either way, but sometimes you kind of give the edge to the person that lost. That's the way you kind of lean towards, because if you're a team that lost, you look back at the things you did wrong and you say, okay, these are things we did wrong, so we got to fix them. Or we look at, okay, how do we do things to get better? And the team that won says, okay, this is what they tried to do. We were able to stop it. We're going to do the same thing. And sometimes, and they don't make adjustments that way. Well, Utah stuck with the same game plan, it seemed like, and Oregon just stuck with the same one as last time, going, it's going to work. It's got to work, right? Right. Third time's the charm. And it did not work. One phrase I saw was the game was a near carbon copy of the one they played in Utah, where they won 38-7. This one's 38-10. Oregon was in the playoffs at one point. They were knocking in at 2. So all these reports of, it ended their playoffs and everything else. No, it was already done. The first 2 times that Utah went to the Pac-12 championship, I believe it's Pac-12 championship, and when they again, it just came down to them playing tougher. There's no other way to go about it. If you look at the box score and you look at the plays, Utah, they turned the ball over twice too, and Oregon just couldn't capitalize. When it's quarterback play, Utah's quarterback was Cameron Rising, was 15 of 24 for 170 yards and a touchdown, but he threw 2 interceptions. But on the flip side, Anthony Brown was 13 of 24, 147 yards and 2 interceptions. One big thing was running the ball. Oregon only had one guy that could really rush the ball, which is Travis Dye for 82 yards. Utah was able to give it to Travis Thompson, Cameron Rising quarterback, Bernard, and TJ Behringer. Like, they all had over 20-some yards rushing. So when you got different guys that can run the ball, it keeps Oregon's defense on edge. Who's going to run the ball here? Who's going to throw the ball here? And then they were able to spread the ball around. But it came down to defense, it came down to tackling, it came to just physicality, which, Oregon has always been known for. Like, I think be physical, the way they play, their offense and everything else. But again, after the Ohio State game, and then it has to come to question, every single head coaching job that's been opened, Mario Cristobal's name has been thrown around. Did that have some type of play on the psyche of the players? Did have psyche on the staff? I don't think so, because Mario Cristobal is a good coach. I don't think he would allow that to happen. Reports he is going to Miami. They fired Manny Diaz, Miami did, and they're going to bring in Mario Cristobal, which we'll talk about another time. I've already kind of talked about loyalty in college football, and some people went out there say, loyalty, drama, what are you talking about? And just come at me on all that stuff, which they don't understand what I'm talking about. They just see the title of the podcast without actually listening to and hearing what I'm saying. Titles, don't judge a book by its cover. Just because of the title of it doesn't necessarily mean what's going on. But Utah won the Pac-12. They're off to the Rose Bowl for the first time in school history. Oregon has been on a downward spiral since the Ohio State game, and they've lost a few that they probably shouldn't have. But, now they're looking for a head coach. So who's going to take that job? Maybe they bring back Chip Kelly. Maybe. My old co-host, still a co-host if he ever wants to come back. Brad Miller's a big Oregon fan. I think he loves Chip Kelly, but I'm not 100% on that. But congratulations to Utah. It just came down to they wanted it more. They were tougher than Oregon. And what I mean by that is not saying Oregon's not tough, but they hit harder. They tackled better. They were blocking better. There's just a better game plan overall. They got out-coached. They got outplayed. And that's just, that just happens. Congratulations to UTSA. They win their conference first ever, I believe, over Western Kentucky. They only lost one game this year, so they had an historic season for UTSA, off to a big-time bowl game. We've already discussed Georgia and Alabama roll tide. Michigan and Iowa played for the Big Ten championship. And I said Michigan was going to come in versus Iowa. Now their defense in Iowa was going to be much better than they saw against Ohio State. And Iowa was just going to ground and pound and try to keep it away from Michigan's offense. But Michigan literally didn't have to do anything. Now, the only way Iowa was going to win was if Michigan was just on this big-time high from beating Ohio State for the first time since 2011. And, Jim Harbaugh's first time beating them as a coach. So that's the only way Iowa was going to be able to catch them off guard. But I did not see that happening with Michigan. They just had to stay the course. Now, Iowa kept it close. It was 14-3 at the end of the first. So Michigan was moving the ball, scoring. Iowa could only get the field goal. And then at second half, it was 0-0. Again, Iowa's defense plays much better, and their linebacker play plays much better than Ohio State does. It's just a fact. I'm sorry. It always has been that way. Then in the third, Michigan scored 7, and then they scored 21 in the fourth. They just kind of wore down Iowa's defense. Iowa could just never get the ball going. Their offense has struggled since Penn State, I think. About Iowa playing Penn State about the time their offense took a dive. I know Petras had been hurt for a game or two of the year, but Michigan is okay being methodical, just running if they need to. If you look at the box score and the playmaking of these guys, McNamara, the quarterback for Michigan, was 16 of 24, 169 yards and a touchdown. He did have an interception. Petras for Iowa, he was 9 of 22 for 137 yards, no touchdowns. Then they had Alex Padilla in there, 10 of 15, an interception, so turned the ball over. So when you're playing these different quarterbacks for Iowa, it's not going to go well. And then for Iowa, they want to get the run game going. Well, Michigan's defense has played a lot better when their defensive line plays well. It takes pressure off the linebackers, which happened with Ohio State. It happened with Iowa. The leading rusher for Iowa is Gavin Williams for 56 yards. So, and Michigan is okay that if they don't pass all over the place, they're okay if they don't run all over the place, and they're okay if they're split down the middle. When you have McNamara with 169 passing yards, and then they have 250 rush yards total. And they got tight ends involved. McNamara played good passes. Like Roman Wilson had 82 yards rushing. Luke Schoonmaker had 49 yards rushing. Eric Hall had 43 yards. Shane Haskins, they kept him in check. He only had 22. But, they're okay with that. They're okay with those type of things. But again, that first half, Iowa's defense did not play that bad. And I said that. I said Iowa's defense is going to play well, but it's going to come down to can Michigan wear them down? And they did. There's a reason why Michigan is number 2 in the nation right now in the college football playoff ranking. There's a reason why they beat Ohio State. Their defense just didn't show up against Michigan State and tackle and play this well. But sometimes it sucks because you want to be undefeated to leave no doubt when you're in a Power 5 conference like the Big Ten. You want to go undefeated and winning the Big Ten conference to leave no doubt that you're going to make it to the college football playoff. But sometimes it's okay to lose that game earlier because then it's kind of like a wake-up call, especially for their defense. Their defense, when they lost to Michigan State, okay, it kind of woke them up. They played better. Michigan did not disappoint. There was a point there where you're like, okay, did they waste all their emotional energy on the Ohio State game? There was no doubt. Jim Harbaugh got those boys ready. The coaching staff got them ready. Kudos to him for winning his first Big Ten title as a coach. God, who knows how long it's been since Michigan won the Big Ten in football. Don't even want to look it up. It's been a long time. But they're on their way. They're number 2 in the college football playoff. Congratulations to them winning the Big Ten title. I talked about Michigan last year, I think, with Brad and Nathan. We talked about Michigan fans and how they treat this and everything else, but you kind of feel for them when they haven't beat Ohio State for a while. Jim Harbaugh, Michigan guy through and through, does a lot. But Iowa's offense has struggled since Penn State, and it continued the run. That's something they're going to have to address. If they can keep the defense the same next year, that's great, but they need better offensive production. They've been known for the I formation, ground and pound, a little bit of shotgun, ground and pound. Maybe they need to adapt. Michigan has adapted their offense, and Iowa might need to do the same thing. But their defense, was way better than Ohio State, and they proved that in the first half, and then they got worn down in the second half. Michigan just has playmakers. They, make just tweaks, not huge adjustments, just a little bit of tweaks. But Michigan wins the Big Ten, so congratulations to them. They haven't won it in a very long time. Houston played Cincinnati for their conference championship, non-Power 5. Houston could score the ball, if they wanted to. Cincinnati was on their way to try to be an undefeated season. Cincinnati came away with the 35-20 win. It was a close game for a little bit until Cincinnati. They do have talented guys, and just ended up pulling away. It was Cincinnati 14-10 at the end of the first, and then it was Cincinnati 14-13 at halftime. So it's a very close game. It's a very tough game. Houston's playing tough. They can score. Reason why, now they're 11-2, but at the time they're 11-1. Regular season undefeated in the conference on their side. But then Cincinnati, their talent just kind of took over. They scored 21 in the third, put them up big, and then Houston can only get 7, only in the fourth quarter. If we look at the numbers, Cincinnati, their quarterback, Desmond Ridder, 11 of 17, 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns is huge, but the big storyline was Houston just couldn't stop the run. It was Jerome Ford, 18 carries, 187 yards. So you don't really need to pass the ball when you can do that. They shared that he made, when you're 11 of 17, you're making precise throws. He was throwing balls on a dime. You don't need to throw it that much, get the 3 touchdowns. Flip side, Clayton Tune was 17 of 26, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he did turn the ball over once. So if he doesn't turn the ball over, he takes 7 points off the board. They're down to 28 points, so it's 20-28. You have a chance to come back and win. So they were close. Very, the only problem was Cincinnati was on third down. They were 0 for 8 on third down. Houston was 5 of 15, so they had the ball for a while. But Houston with the 1 turnover, yards, Cincinnati 400, Houston 336. And what's crazy is Cincinnati only had the ball for 19 minutes and Houston had it for 40. So Houston was able to control them. Like I said, that first half, Cincinnati was not moving the ball very well. In the second half, they just unloaded. Houston's defense made too many mistakes. They allowed too many plays. But congrats to Cincinnati. They ended up undefeated. They are now in the college football playoff. We will do a whole podcast on that. So check out that one. It's a good one. Big 12. Baylor and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State is coming off the emotional big win over Oklahoma that sent Lincoln Riley all the way to California. Baylor's coming off a great year with a good offense with Coach Dave Aranda's defense leading in the way. So you have 2 defenses going strong on each other. We did a preview. I did think that this was going to be a higher scoring game. Oklahoma State did win earlier in the year, but again, it was very similar to the Michigan-Iowa. Did Oklahoma State spend all of their energy on the Oklahoma game? Does Baylor have the horses to keep up with the Oklahoma State horses? And they did. Baylor got the revenge. They won the Big 12 21-16. And your heart it hurts for those kids because at the very end of the game, they hand the ball off. Oklahoma State, they're down at their own, or they made it down to Baylor's 6-yard line. They come down, try to score. They throw it to the back of the end zone, get a pass interference call. There's about a minute. I think it was like a minute and 25 seconds left. Pass interference call that some call questionable. Then when it's, first and goal, Baylor gets a stop. Second and goal, they get a stop. So Baylor's defense is stepping up. You're going up against a great Oklahoma State offense. There was where they handed the ball off. He jumped in the air and they think he scored, but he didn't. They go for on 3rd and goal. They throw it. They do not complete it. So it all comes down to that fourth and goal play. I think there was 25 seconds left. Let me look. There was 30 seconds left. They run like a split zone, runs all the way. He dives for the pylon. He is literally, if you look at the pylon camera for Oklahoma State, he's literally like half a football away from the pylon, the dive, and that ended it. There was like 24 seconds left. All Baylor had to do was run the ball or take a knee, but he was literally about half a football to the pylon, if not closer. And that's a game, like maybe less. It's a game of inches. Like that dive, he is so close. If he just got the ball inside the pylon and touched the pylon, it is a touchdown, and Oklahoma State would win the game. So it was a hard-fought battle. They've seen each other before. Again, when you play a team twice, it's very tough to beat them again, number one, because, again, you're looking at what you did wrong. How can you fix it? Okay, what did we let them do right? How do we stop that? And then the team that won, do you change your game plan because it worked last time? Or, well, we're going to keep the same game plan, but we know they're going to make adjustments. So you got to really almost overcoach and be prepared for a ton of things. So it's weird when you play teams twice. And, that's weird. That's why I kind of like sometimes in the SEC, it doesn't always work where they don't play each other until the SEC championship game. Big Ten, that's why they play each other regular season sometimes, but sometimes they don't, where they have the two sides. The Big 12 didn't. Sometimes they play each other, sometimes they don't. But you feel bad for Oklahoma State in that, like, Oklahoma State, if they would have won the Big 12, a big case would have been made. Do you put them in over Cincinnati? But Cincinnati's undefeated, so who knows? But Oklahoma State needed that win to get to the college football playoff. They did not get it, obviously. But there was a big case for them to make the college football playoff. They needed Cincinnati to lose. Well, the big talk would have been if they would have won, and if Alabama beat Georgia, do you put Oklahoma State in because they won the Big 12? But they only have one loss. But Georgia lost to Alabama, who's number one. So we're going to this craziness. It would have been absolutely insane. But they were very close. They need a lot of things, but you feel for them. But Baylor, they won the game. It was a tough fought game by both sides. You almost didn't want it to end. And their defense instead of, they have some of the best defenses in college football. Blake Shapen for Baylor, he 23 of 28 for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's the big thing. But they were able, and then running the ball, they weren't really there. So Oklahoma State did what they needed to do, just certain plays they gave up. Oklahoma State on the other side, Spencer Sanders, 31 of 46, 257 yards, but he had 4 interceptions. So Baylor's defense stepped up. But Oklahoma State's defense stepped up too. So, the 4 interceptions, you're giving away 4 possessions. Maybe you only throw 2 interceptions. You get those possessions back and you have a chance to come down and score. But these defense, it was just a game of defense. Their defense stepped up. This is not what you expect in the Big 12. Coach Knowles for Oklahoma State really changed it, and Coach Dave Aranda really changed it at Baylor for defense. So are we going to see defenses come back in the Big 12? It's crazy. Pittsburgh and Wake Forest. Pittsburgh beat Wake Forest, who had a historic year. Pittsburgh won the ACC, which you haven't heard anybody win the ACC for a while. It's always been Clemson. So it's been a crazy year for that. Utah State, Diego State for their conference. Coach Napier coached for the Raging Cajuns for the last time, I believe, for the championship. I don't know if he'll coach in a bowl game, but this is his last time coaching. They come on top over Appalachian State for their conference. For Billy Napier, he won to end the fight with his guys before he heads off to Florida. Northern Illinois wins their conference after they beat Kent State. And then California beats USC in their game. Why they played for that, I don't know. They just had to play that game. I'm just reading down the schedule. But we ended with the college football championship games. Then we have our college football playoff is set. Number 1 is Alabama. Number 2 is Michigan. Number 3 is Georgia. Number 4 is Cincinnati. I am going to do a podcast on Cincinnati, but I told you if Alabama, I told you this was probably going to be it. The only other change you would have seen is maybe Michigan at 1, but then they're not going to put Alabama at 2 and Georgia at 3 for them to play again, back to back. And then I just don't see them justifying putting Cincinnati over Georgia. But congratulations to Michigan making the first college football playoff for them. Alabama's back at number 1. It's going to be great. They're coming out. They have all the bowl games set. We'll do a podcast discussing the big games for the bowl games. Some of them are going to be exciting. There's one really in particular I'm going to be hopefully to watch. If you guys know, one of my favorite college football coaches is playing a team that he hasn't ever coached against, and it's going to be fun. But the college football championship games were fun. They were exciting. Congratulations to the college football conference champions. We'll have a podcast coming out about a non-Power 5 finally making the college football playoff. We'll discuss all that. And then later on in the week, we'll discuss more on this college coaching carousel. And then I kind of want to discuss more of a particular coach that left and a coach that took the job for him. So be on the lookout for all that for the other podcast episodes. So be on the lookout for all that. And then we'll talk about more in depth of the big Goliath that got taken down. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that episode. So we discussed all that. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast. Please like and subscribe and do all that for me. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. And thank you for anybody out there that listens. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. Hopefully we can get this show moving on up. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast, and we will see you next time.